So good morning, everybody. My name is George McIsaac. This is Dave Love, and we welcome you to the Basics of Geology, Mining, and Mineral Processing. In one way or another, in your work, you're all involved in the mining industry, and you read technical reports, and you read press releases, and you may have to go visit mine sites, and you get to see what engineers and geologists write or talk about. And they're talking a language that you don't understand. And so the idea behind this course is to teach you that language, teach you the words, teach you the processes, so that when you read these reports, you have a better idea of what they're talking about, but also you have a better idea on how to gauge the risk associated with what they're saying. So there's some people from industry here, from Zurich, insurance. You need to figure out exactly what does that mean when they're saying this word? Is there a risk associated with this or not? Same thing with financial analysts. Okay, so how do I translate that into the error I put into the cash flow model I'm building? All right, so that's the general concept behind this course. In this course, what you'll learn is how mineralization is formed. What are the processes on this planet that take metals in the environment and concentrate it into one area? Those are the deposits that our geologists look for. How we do look for these deposits, the exploration process. How we estimate and report the resources. So the estimation is how much metal there is in the ground. How is that metal distributed throughout the deposit? And how do we report this according to the Canadian regulations? How we mine the ore, so both open pit and underground mining. We'll talk about this. How we process it, so the different types of the ore we send to the process plant goes through a different series of processes through the plant, and then from there we produce either a concentrate or a metal. But basically, so we concentrate it and then we extract the metal from these minerals. That's what we'll cover over the next 2 days. You have a much better idea of the technology that we're using, the processes, both natural and human, how we go about doing things. And to illustrate all this vocabulary and these processes, we're going to show you a bunch of videos, a bunch of pictures, and the idea behind it, as I said earlier, is give you a meaning of this information and assess a little bit the risk that's associated. One of the things I really want you to understand is that there are no two deposits alike. They might be one next to the other, but they're different. And we need to understand the geology. Me as a mining engineer, I need to understand the geology to figure out how I'm going to be mining it. In the mineral processing, we need to understand the mineralogy to understand how we can process it. And as a mining engineer, I need to know what's happening in the process plant to figure out what kind of revenues can be generated so I can figure out what to be mining. So that's the general concept of what we're going to be doing. Okay, so let's start our engines. So my first question today is, well, which factors influence the value of a property? So if I were to ask you, sir, do you think that metal prices impact the value of the ore body?
Yes, I will.
And how's that?
Because it's volume times unit price.
Okay.
So the value of deposit will depend on how much each unit of metal worth.
Okay, yes, that's right. So that's a good point. So as metal price increases, the margin we make on each ton we mine also increases. However, as the metal value increases, there's some ore resources that were not economical previously, but now because that value has increased, they are now valuable. So now that increases our resources, increases our mine life. All right, second point, the knowledge of its physical attributes. By that I mean we know the shape of the ore body, we know the distribution of the resources. If I may ask you, what do you think that this influences the value of the ore body? Prends le micro.
No, of course, because it'll impact significantly the capex that needs to be put in to even put the mine pre-production. Like if it's a larger, wider deposit versus something that's more compact, more to the surface. Yeah, it just overall impacts the capex. So.
Mhm. So yes, but also there's another aspect to this. What happens is as we know more and more about the deposits, the amount of risk associated with it decreases. We have a much better idea of what the geology looks like. We have a much better idea of what the resource is. And therefore, when we build our cash flow models, all of a sudden, our risk is decreasing. Third point, the technologies at our disposal. Miss Jennifer.
I would say yes, because when we have like technology that it works a lot, how it works, I would say it's easier to have those ore out of the mine, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would say yes.
Yes, that's a good point. Now, also what happens is as our technologies become better and better, either the cost of production decreases, which allows us to mine more of the resource, or like in the case back in the early 1980s, we found the way to leach copper from oxide ores in a good production commercial way, and that now in some of the deposits we're going to show you today, there's a large cap of oxide ores, and below we have sulfide ores. And historically, we take sulfides ore and we float the sulfides and we produce a concentrate. And all the oxides above had to be thrown out. So there was a big capex associated with removing all of this. But in the early 80s, commercially, it became much more easier. And we could remove that material and actually recover all the copper or all the gold that was in that material. So technology increases the resources that are available. And the last point, you're drinking coffee, that's okay. But do you think that the availability of infrastructures has an impact on the value of an ore body?
Yeah, if you ultimately have to move the ore less or build less infrastructure on site, it should ultimately reduce costs that need to go into mining.
That's exactly it. Exactly. So compare a deposit that you're developing in Sudbury versus the Ring of Fire. So everything has to be moved up to the Ring of Fire, high cost for building the roads, the railways, there's no electricity up there. So bringing up all the fuel up there to generate and then bringing everything down. You need to build a camp. Our friends at Cisco Development or at Windfall, when you don't have Windfall anymore, but everything has to be over there. So yeah, it drives up the costs if you're too far, and that reduces the value of the ore body. Perfect. Thank you. So okay, everybody who's listening to us virtually and here present in this room, you have received the files electronically. Okay, so there's all the information we're going to talk about today and more are available in these files. The folks that are here in the room also have a booklet that is printed in black and white for cost reasons. You don't have a USB key. So again, I sent everybody electronically. What you're going to find in the books and in the electronic files are, well, all the slides, of course. You'll have an FAQ. You'll have a glossary. You'll have our biographies. You'll have our email addresses, so you can always reach out to us if you have questions in the coming weeks or months. And if you take a look, you open your book at the very last page. For the folks that are here in this room, I want you to rip that page out. Rip it out. Come on. Rip it out. And write down one thing that you would like to get out of this course, or one or two things. And I will ask the people online to write that in the chat. The idea behind this is that, yes, we do have some material that's prepared, but I'm going to take a look at all your answers. And if there's some ways for us to adjust our course to meet your questions, we'll do so. All right, so take a few minutes. So what are we going to do? We'll talk first about geology. These mineral deposits are formed either on surface or at depth. It doesn't mean that's where we will find them today, but at the time of formation, they were formed either on surface or at depth. So we'll go through these things. We'll talk about how Canada has distributed the rocks and the types of minerals we can find throughout the country. And throughout all this, you'll get a lot of information about geology, geological terms. It's a pretty tough thing to do on a Sunday morning. Okay, you have better things to do than be here with us. And there's some folks online who are in Vancouver. I salute you. All right. Then this afternoon, we'll talk about mineral resources reporting and estimation and reporting. So we'll talk about how we go about making sure that the information that we are using for doing our resource estimation is the right one. Garbage in, garbage out. How do we make sure of that? There are some sources of errors. Doing an estimation is chock full of errors because don't forget, we are on surface and we're trying to estimate the volume of something that's underneath the ground that we can't see. We'll talk about the role and the profile of the qualified person who is the professional engineer or geologist who is doing these calculations and reporting them to you. So some best practice guidelines that we follow in our work developed by the Canadian Institute of Mining and Metallurgy. The classification systems that we use. How do we use words to transmit to you the level of risk that we gauge is present in the numbers that we give you? And we'll talk about National Instrument 43-101, which is a Canadian regulations that deals with the how publicly traded companies transmit technical information to the public. And we'll see different applications of that. We'll talk about mining methods, both open pit and underground. In both cases, I'll show you big pieces of equipment. It's much more fun to see big gear than small dinky toys. We'll talk about design parameters, how we go about designing a pit, how we go about operating a pit. And I'll show you 4 mining methods for underground that cover 99% of all the mining around the world. We'll talk about processing. So we take the ore from the mine, we bring it to the process plant, and over there are different unit operations that we do. Some are common to everything, but others are specific to the type of minerals that we have. So we'll go through all that. We'll concentrate on copper, gold, nickel, what else? Iron, but basically anything you want. You know, if you want to know about lithium extraction, we can tell you about it. Okay, so it's open to you. And we'll talk about smelter contracts, how we go about figuring out the revenues. We'll do some due diligence work. Dave will talk about the exploration process in more detail. How do we reduce the risk? How do we reduce the amount of money we use and reduce the risk associated with it? And give a case study about BRIEX, which happened back in the 1990s. You're all kids here on this room, so you weren't really aware. So we'll tell you the whole story and you'll get a good feel for it, why we have the regulations we have. This time around, we're bringing in a new segment to this thing. Instead of me going through due diligence of resource, I'm going to take 1 hour to talk about all the different cost drivers in the mining industry. People always ask me, well, what's a good cutoff grade for this? Well, the answer is, I don't know. It depends on all these drivers. And we'll do a due diligence on processing. And we'll wrap up the day with battery materials and tailings and waste, because tailings do occupy a lot of ground. So, and maybe at that time, it'll be good to talk about what Osisko Development's doing at Caribou, which I find is quite unique.